That's a fairly subtle introduction. Kia ora everybody, kia ora koutou e ngā rangatira. Mihi atu ki te kaupapa o te rā, no reira, tēnā rā, koutou katoa. Welcome to Operational Performance and Audit Committee with a risk focus today. Do we have any apologies? Full complement today. On default, no declarations of interest as far as I'm aware. Anybody got any all of a sudden? No public forums, petitions or deputations. So we'll move to item 5, which is the confirmation of minutes for 22nd of June. Sorry, I'm going to have to take this off. I'm going to die. Warm enough. Minutes of the 22nd of June, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Horrell. Seconded Councillor McPhail. Any items of note, questions?
Can I just raise that my leave of absence wasn't recorded as an apology? I brought this up at the last council meeting, and it didn't quite make its way through.
Yeah. So you were on leave, Councillor Beard.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Clarification, and I don't know about this one. Do we need to record who's on Zoom and who's not on Zoom?
They're just recorded as present, are they not? Does it matter whether they're on Zoom?
Sometimes we record, or some stuff I've been at, they record on Zoom, just for clarity.
Okay.
Because some are physically in the room and others are in the room by Zoom.
Okay. So we've got
I'm not sure who was here. I'm just asking the question, do we or should we?
that might be a broader question for the organisation, but we can do that today.
Yeah, we can review that and find out.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will make
It's just a question, because if people are looking back, if you're looking back 2, 3, 4 years down the track, and you were looking for something, it may give some clarity of some of the conversation.
And then the potentially limits to how much say you have on Zoom.
I don't know the answer, I just raised the question.
Yep, thank you. Other than that, we've had mover and a seconder, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. We have no notification of extraordinary or urgent business, unless somebody's got something right now. Great. Questions? None have been forwarded. Chairman's report is item 8. I would assume it has been read. Any questions? I'll just add that item 4 in that list, the Treasury policy review has been done, and I'm sure we'll see that soon. I'll move that then if that needs to be done.
Just clarification, item no number, like as in it's item 8 down the bottom, progress. Is that going to be this term or next term?
Before October, you mean?
No, but well, Mike Neild
Yep.
from the software holdings will come. Are we going to get value out of, and the question really, are we going to get value with him coming to speak to this term of council? Or would we get value out of him coming to speak to, after the election, to the next term of council? Because you could argue that the information he will deliver to us is going forward with the new councillors around the table. I don't know who they're going to be, but let's say there's a change. We're really, in some respects, winding down and making sure we've done the work we said we were going to do. So when we get the best completion.
Yep. I mean, we can review that. Certainly there is things happening in the RSHL space currently that we are going to bring to council soon. In terms of transition from a software organisation to a more of a shared services organisation, some paperwork to go with that. So it might be timely at that point, and probably going to do that at council rather than OPAC, to talk through a bit of the background to that. We could have Mike there for that. Certainly, I think where things are going forward, irrespective of whether we choose to have him here to speak to that, we will be looking to brief incoming council on the work in that space. So actually, do you have a preference? Chairman Hall?
I think that Gordon probably makes a good point, and I think there's a very strong likelihood that most of the regional sector may well sign up to this going forward, whereas in the past we've only had a few of us that have been involved. The existing ones get a little bit of a concession, but we'll have to wait and see. But that probably makes sense at this stage of it when those changes are put to not that far from election. It probably makes sense to suggest an outside support that. Yeah.
Anybody else? Bruce, sorry.
Oh, thank you, Lyndall. I was only reflecting here, it depends where we are in our business, in our relationship with RSHL. And actually, Lloyd, I don't think this is by the way, a die in the ditch territory.
No, it's not.
But it's also, I know this sounds terrible, what do we need to leave for the new council? Because we've spent 18 months in effect, I mean, we've had Mike on the list to get here at some stage. We've been trying to rework our relationship with RSHL as the old council and the old committee. It might make, all I just want to counter is it might make sense for us to actually meet with Mike so we can leave a particular position for the incoming council. But I don't sense necessarily at this stage it's such a burning issue that we need to necessarily see him. It's just, it was going to be a completion of our attempt to upgrade our relationship with RSHL. If we're comfortable with that relationship, my comments can be totally disregarded. And we just carry on and see with the new term.
Thanks, Bruce. Actually, that's a very good point, and I think I would be recommending that we endeavour to see him before the new term, and I'm quite conscious that there might be a lot of work that's being left for the new council, so if we can tick something off as being semi-secure, then that would be my preference, but it's up to the meeting.
That may be that we actually had two, one now, to finish, and then one for next.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer, I just raised the question because when you get the best values, that's what I was asking.
The transaction cost probably is going to be a bit low because we just
Yeah.
There's a few number of the room, probably no Mike, so it's not as if we need to necessarily have him here. So the transaction cost is low, as long as it's relevant time for us to spend on it. That's of course the critical question.
Well, and if there are items that are coming up that we really are going to, the full council are going to need, then I think if we can endeavour to get him in contact before too long, and if we need to get him back, or somebody needs to get him back after October, then we can do that too. Okay?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I've been told to go online, but you'll have no photo, but I've got my sound wrong.
That's all right, you just work away. So I will move my report, I'm assuming. Somebody like to second that, please? Thanks. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. That was Councillor McPhail, sorry. Now. Right, thank you. Moving to item 9.1. As part of the General Manager's report, we've got the vehicle fleet report.
We do, and I've got Chris Wood in attendance to speak to the report today. Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, kia ora, Chris. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The fleet report is in two parts. The first part proposes a change to the procurement process. During the last financial year, we found there was a mismatch between the process of determining what fleet needed to be replaced and the availability of the capital funds for that. And in fact, you recall that in August last year, you approved the replacement of 9 vehicles. When it came time to procure those vehicles, we found that there was no availability of capital budget for that, due in part to the rolling into that financial year a vehicle purchase from the prior period. So really we needed to align the determination of need then flowing into the capital planning, capital program. That is proposed to happen in the second half of any financial year, with the purchases and procurement happening in the following financial year. So there's a proper match up between determination of need approval of a maximum number of vehicles to be purchased by council, then the provision of that in the capital program, and then the process of procuring those vehicles in the following financial year. So there's a proposed policy change. Item 10.1 in the policy document, you'll find that proposed change I've just described is included in that policy, and we're seeking approval of that change to that policy. The second part of the report is presentation of information metrics. Now, given the fleet didn't change substantially at all during that prior period, the composition of the fleet hasn't really changed. What we have brought in this time through the use of e-road metrics is some information on the fleet utilisation by team. So the fleet vehicles are allocated nominally to teams for their use, and there's a table in the report that shows the level of usage of those vehicles. Now, I'll preface that by saying COVID obviously has interrupted the delivery of some services during the year. So the vehicle usage metrics may not be typical. They would reflect that a lot of people are working from home and there's disruption to the delivery of services. However, the table shows by team the usage of vehicles. That table is based on the assumptions that if a vehicle is used at all once during the day, it is being used for the day. So if it was taken out, it was assumed to be used, taken out to the field, maybe sitting around in the field for a matter of hours and then brought back to the yard. So if it was used at all during the day, it was assumed to be used during the day. It was also assumed that each vehicle was used only by the team to which it was allocated, and that may or may not be particularly accurate. But in terms of giving a preliminary insight into the fleet usage, that table in the report shows by team that level of usage. I think it's useful going forward, once we return to a more normal service delivery environment, be useful to determine the allocation of vehicles between teams and maybe shifting vehicles as required. Already some vehicles are used by other teams, not just the one they're allocated to. So already decisions are being made around that. So that's really the vehicle report. In terms of vehicle age, you'll see a substantial number of the fleet over 4 years old, but a substantial number of the vehicles have under 120,000 kilometres of usage. While in terms of the replacement policy, over 4 years indicates we have a significant number that should be eligible for replacement. In fact, given the relatively low usage mileage kilometres covered, the need is not quite so pressing as that graph may suggest. Given that, I will take any questions around the fleet vehicle report.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Cook and then Councillor Callum. Thanks, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question about policy in 10.2E, which shows the criteria that the council will consider when replacing the fleet. Can I just ask whether that's in priority order?
No, it's not.
No, it's not, yeah.
No, they're just a range of things that we take into account. In fact, you know, actually if I was going to argue it and it was going to be in priority order, I think safety would be the priority, and we'd be putting the Euro standards which reflect the safety ratings at the top.
The world is moving more and more towards electric vehicles. It's happening probably more rapidly than some of us thought it would. And we're looking here at a time frame which is going to stretch out at least 4 years for each of those vehicles when we get them. So I think we should be applying a priority to fuel efficiency and hybrid vehicles.
Yep.
As a priority.
As we get more information about and data from the e-road system and the book it system, and we understand how people are using the vehicles and what they need to use the vehicles for, I think that will better inform us as to what sort of vehicles that we need. You'll see from the statistics that we have a large number of utility vehicles at the moment, and we have those to be able to go on farm, and as many of you will know yourselves, it is very difficult to get suitably appropriate electric versions of those as it currently stands. Now we hope that industry will catch up and we'll get those designed, built and in the country so we can use them, but that's not a current luxury that we have, you know, akin to many New Zealanders.
Thanks. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I have a number of questions, Chris. But just picking up on the point that you raised, I went in yesterday to look for a hybrid, and I'm anywhere between 4 months to a year. So I just wonder whether, depending on what our buying policy is, whether we can actually buy within the term that's allocated here within the council buying period. And one of the things that was going past my mind was, did I buy an interim vehicle to save the retail cost of my trader? Now that's probably applicable to us as well, because what is the value of our fleet? And picking up on your other point, I think some of these vehicles are getting, and the list is not here. That's the first time the list has not been here of the vehicles, but the age of the vehicles tell me that we're probably in the brink now of actually not meeting some of our safety standards. They're too old and they're not doing enough Ks. So my first question really is 51 vehicles, but does that include or not the 3 extra vehicles that was mentioned in the paper?
No, it doesn't, because this is the existing fleet.
So it's going to be 54 vehicles.
Potentially, that is, so those are executive vehicles, and it requires the executive to take up the offer of the.
Can I be really bold? I think, Madam Chair, we've got too many vehicles. I think we've got the wrong type of vehicles. We've got too many utes, and I think there is a real SUVs, all-wheel drive SUVs will take you everywhere you want to go with about 90% of the allocated hardware that you are actually going around. I would really like us to really take a very heavy look, and I've got a number of sort of 35, 40 in my mind with a very efficient policy. I also think that we should be looking at, there are some vehicle usage here I'd be better off to pay a mileage rate to than to provide a vehicle and the associated costs, those sorts of things. I don't see that in here as being, we are really looking at how our emissions as an organisation is being looked at, how we're looking at their effects within the climate change category, and maybe there's a better way of actually doing our business with vehicles. And the delays in buying my preferred option is so late at the moment, I may have to put an interim policy in place, because I think that fleet is getting, the majority of the fleet is really too old to our policy. And if we're only doing, if we can't do 120,000 Ks in 4 years, I really question whether we've actually got the right policies in place. I think that's
You've covered off quite a lot there, Councillor.
But I really think that this has been a concern of mine for a while, because, and I'll give you an example, we went out to Waituni the other day, we had, I think it's about 7 people from EU turned up, 7 vehicles, and it was noted by the public. The second part is that we are sitting there in the public eye and they are looking, and I want to make sure that we have it right for our own policy. And the view I'm getting is that we carried on our work streams through COVID and we completed our work, but some of this report suggests that we actually didn't do the work that we said we were going to do within that work period. And I know we're staffed down. Yesterday you would have talked about 7 staff down in compliance. I don't know what that means for the organisation's work program. So I'm really trying to put some heat on the fact that if we're going to do this and actually rate it public, we need to make sure that we are delivering the services efficiently as we can, because they are being quite critical and we need to show leadership in this space. Sorry, that's a bit of a speech, I'm sorry, but that's, I really think that this needs to come back in a shorter period of time to look at the progress made down an avenue of improvement, not just come back again in 12 months' time.
Thanks, Councillor. Chris, have you got any comments to make there?
Yes, well, certainly when we included, perhaps for the first time, the usage metrics. It would cast a light on the fleet usage, even putting aside the COVID disruption. It is telling a story. Your point is noted around the time to procure. I myself have just purchased a vehicle and I had to wait 6 months for it to arrive. So it's not a matter of placing an order and it arrives 2 weeks later. So your point is noted around the timing of actual procurement. And in terms of the composition of the fleet, that is something that we obviously will need to look at internally. We do have a large number of utes, and it's a matter of talking to the teams and the field staff around, are utes really what we do need, and what is the composition of the fleet?
Thanks, Chris. Amy, did you have anything, or shall we?
No, I mean, at the risk of using an overused phrase, we are on a journey with this one. Part of it for us has been about getting the e-roads system and data in place so we can make an informed decision about that. I think since I'm not sure when we started reporting fleet usage, it might have been before my time, I'm unsure, but I certainly know that 2 years, so not that long. Certainly in 2019, we had 58 vehicles. We're now operating 51. There is a decline. We need to make sure we've got the right vehicle. We need to make sure we've got safe vehicles. We're committed to doing all of those things. But I take the point about being faster and in relation to that.
Thanks. I've got Councillor Horrell, Councillor Beard, and then Councillor McPhail, and then
It seems like too many, doesn't it?
Mr. Robertson.
I might come back at the end of this, okay?
Okay. So, Nicole, thank you.
Thanks for the report, and it is a vast improvement of what we've had. I think at the end of the day, we want the people in the right vehicles to do the job safely. I think there's still potential to get further gains out of the pool system. And the other thing with all wanting to buy hybrids or electrics, but I'm not sure E-Roads gives us the information, but actually I'm a little bit disappointed with, I thought the fuel efficiency would be better, but the reality is if you do a lot of open road running, probably 90% of the time you're still using petrol. So I've gone from a 2.5 to a different breed, but a hybrid, but I've only actually managed to drop 1.3 kilometres on average, which if I was doing more town running, I'm sure that would be much more significant. But again, I think we need to factor this into the vehicles we buy, into saying, look, we're doing the right thing getting the hybrid. If it's not cost effective, but those are the things we need to take into consideration. And we probably have got too many utes, but we actually need to make sure that we're targeting for the right vehicle. And if some of them are only getting 40-50%, but certainly just what people looking ahead, I think we can make some further efficiencies. But this report is good. It's picked up on quite a few things. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Beard.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. So I'd certainly like to sort of support the tone of Lloyd's comments. It does frustrate us to see a lot of underutilised vehicles and knowing that diesel utes are going to be devaluing as time goes by. So are we needing that type of vehicle? My question also relates to of the senior staff who get a vehicle as part of their package. How many are in the 51 vehicles? Because that might show relatively low use in kilometres if they're only largely driving between home and the office. So if that was going to be, if we're going to revisit how those packages were, as in do people want to have a vehicle that largely sits, we're talking about mode shift, we're talking about having the right vehicle for people and whether they want the vehicle that we are offering them. Do you have two vehicles, or do you have the right vehicle that you need for what you do? So it does appear that we are over vehicled, and the more information that comes out on the utilisation and how we can get better use of pool vehicles, I think that's going to be better for the organisation. But it's a constant focus.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor McPhail.
Yeah, I sort of agree too, but I just think that and it's great seeing all this data, and actually we're getting more data to understand how everybody's travelling, which is great. So it's real positive. To my knowledge, we actually have decreased, we're close to 60 vehicles, I think, when I first got in. So I take it there's more employees here, but we've got less vehicles. So I think we're heading in the right direction. And but I think in regards to the type of vehicles, I think I agree with Lloyd that there's plenty of SUVs out there that can probably do a lot of the work. The other suggestion that I want while we're talking about vehicles is actually the colour of them. A white vehicle coming up the drive is a red flag, and we could be very.
So should we have red vehicles?
That we could actually say, let's be a bit more friendly and have more green looking. But it is reality. To do business, let's be a bit more positive, because that white means authority. Police are white. There's a lot of vehicles are probably white vehicles. So it would actually be to change we're not trying to ambush people either, but it's actually just, it's got a wee bit more positive. We don't all have to be all white. You might get actually positive feedback from that.
It may not matter what colour the vehicle is. If you're doing something wrong, you probably don't want it coming up your driveway.
But it's actually just to challenge things a wee bit. But certainly, like you're getting some great data here that you can actually make some good decisions in the future on trying to utilise these vehicles. And I'd suggest, Nickel, that you need to lay off the pedal too. So
it tells you as soon as you.
I was driving that day.
They're quite a motor policy for you.
Yes, special clause.
Your 6 leaders come back and complain.
All right, thank you. Bruce.
Well, I was just trying to think where this is getting us to, and I think it's great. And Chris, I just want to acknowledge the metrics. I think as Jeremy has and other contributors have, it gives us a start on it. I think the metrics are probably generous in their use, because you're attributing a day rather than an hour, 2 hours or something. So the number. Well, mind you, people are working weekends. I suppose it doesn't capture that, but there's a level I suspect there where these are showing generous usage of vehicles. And I'm also conscious that I hear, and I'm aware of it, the lead time to actually even do it. Even if we wanted to activate something now, it could be some time down the track. So it seems to me that we need to have a target here of next year's annual plan. It's annual plan, next year's. That actually the thinking that you're looking for, well, I think that the committee are looking for is implemented for the annual plan. But I think there's one step prior to that, which is your very good point, Amy, which is actually, given it's going to take a lead time to turn these over, subject to your idea of we might have to have an interim buy, we need a safety check. You've made that as a strong point, Amy, and so I think the other thing we have to have firstly is a safety check. Going back to what Chris is saying, which is aligning our purchasing process in the ideal world, which comes back to the annual plan. If we've got safety issues, we've got to deal with those now. And Lloyd, you're making that point as well. They might be past their use by date, so we should be prepared to consider something that's interim in nature.
Can I just respond to that point, Bruce, if that's right? The vehicles all get regularly serviced, and we're not just replacing vehicles from an age point of view. When we're looking at replacing vehicles, we are also looking, and we always have done, these often, and they're listed in the policy. We give reference to the wear and tear of the vehicle. We certainly make sure that the vehicles, like I said, are well serviced, and I acknowledge that things do fail with age, and I argue that probably some of us are all feeling that. But certainly, the safety of our people is paramount, and we do make sure. I just want to stress the point that we don't send them out in vehicles that aren't safe. I take the broader point, but yeah.
So, sorry, all I want to just reflect on is in terms of taking the paper forward and rather, I mean, there was a point, this is just another annual review. I think what I'm trying to suggest, I don't think it needs to be added into a motion or anything like that, because in fact, for the sake of the meeting, I'm prepared to move the motion, but I'm just trying to reflect the action that I'd expect to come out of this, which is that we should be targeting, recognising now that we're targeting the annual plan. I think we need to do a check whether it's safety or whether it's way past loss of value, the issue of the interim thing that needs to occur as well, so that we can get ourselves back onto a cycle of rational buying and meeting our aspirations. Can you get them painted green, please?
Yes, thank you, Bruce.
Is it green? Is it green? Green.
Yeah,
Green.
great. Following that, really like the beginnings of the data that we're starting to collect, and I would stress that this is the beginning, really. It's the first snapshot quite like this that I've seen, so it will give us, going forward, some basis for the decisions that we have to make. And so I would draw your attention to the actual recommendations in the report. So the recommendations that Bruce has offered to move, thank you, small word, gone out of my head. It is recommended that Council Resolve 2 note the proposed change to the vehicle procurement policy process, which is the alignment with the annual plan. Note the changes to the motor vehicle policy to accommodate that. Approve the proposed vehicle replacement transition plan for the forthcoming period, and note the fleet information. So you're all clear about what's being
I'll second.
noted. Thank you, Councillor Cook. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried.
Just clarification, so we've had discussion about coming back possibly within 12 months. We've had discussion about some of the things we would be looking at. Is that covered in those 4 parts of the resolution or not? Or are we just going to take it as an action from?
I'll take it as an action.
Yep, and it can come back in my chair's report as
Thank
as
you.
progress on where it's at. Thank you. Thank you for that fulsome discussion. I would remind you as we go through to the next item that a question is quite good if you have one. Not that I want to stifle robust discussion, but just bear that in mind, please. So item 2 is the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Management System report, which is quite a mouthful. Welcome, Paul. Would you like to sit at the computer, please?
Oh, of course.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Right, good morning, everyone. Right, so I take the report has been read, and just to clarify that we are reporting for the last 2 quarters. So just a couple of things I would just like to just bring up on the report just to highlight your attention to. The first one being is that the Health, Safety and Wellbeing team is now fully staffed. So we've taken on a new very welcome person, Carolyn Hillis. She's in fact sitting at the back of the room here. Carolyn has joined us in January and has filled the role of the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Coordinator. And this was a direct action of our last audit through Audit Plus, a strong recommendation to senior management that we bring on a additional resource. Just another item just to highlight, again, is just around the COVID-19 response. So, we've all been through this various iterations of COVID. Just to highlight one piece of work that was conducted through the beginning of the year, which was, I thought was pretty well done from our perspective, is our response to a individual actually coming onto site with, potentially being exposed to COVID, and the response from the incident management team, and then the actual implementation of our continuity planning as such around that. Led to us actually working for several months from home and really working our way through that spike of COVID as it hit Southland and the rest of the country. And we worked our way through that spike and came out the other end, in a pretty good state. Once we returned back to the office as such, back to normal working conditions as such, we saw a very average fluctuation of cases in our organisation, and we managed to keep COVID pretty much at the front door and then really let it in through our organisation, which was good. A direct response from our bringing on our new health and safety coordinator is our training program that has just really kicked off. So over the last 2 years, I would say, and a lot of it is due to a lot of our training having been cancelled. We've really got our teeth into getting some of these key training elements done, and you can see, across the board, we've been covering quite a few key pieces of training that we've been wanting to cover for a while now. So, that's really a testament to the fact that we are now properly resourced up and we are able to manage them in a far more effective way. Just something else just to highlight. I know last year we spoke quite a lot about the dive project happening in Breaksea Sound, and just a piece of work that we finished beginning of this year was just around the risk assessment from moving from the support vessel to the actual barge. And there were a couple of key elements there and a couple of hoops we had to jump through to get that together, which we eventually did pull off and successfully. And we managed to run a period of time off that barge itself. We're still seeing, a reduction in our near-miss reporting, and we've spoken about this before. Near-miss reporting is our opportunity to learn, and can be a leading indicator into possible incidents in the future. This is being highlighted right across the organisation. So, it's definitely on the forefront of our leadership forum and most certainly with our health and safety reps, trying to look at ways how we can further encourage near-miss reporting, how we can make it easier. It is a work in progress, and, the plan is to really try and push that over the next 12 months at least, to try and increase our numbers of reports and to try and encourage people to report near misses. Another direct action from our audit last year was just getting our evacuation schemes for all of our buildings sorted out. That posed to be quite a challenge, believe it or not. It's quite a program you have to go through to try and get your evacuation schemes authorised by the correct authorities. But we managed to get all 3 buildings through that, so that was a great piece of work down there. From a health and wellbeing perspective, once again we took part in the bike challenge, which was a bit of a challenge because most of us were working from home at that time. So we did see a bit of a reduction in numbers taking part this year, but still got some good mileage out of that activity. And then once again we ran our vaccination program in the last quarter as such. Right, I think that basically covers all the bits and pieces that I wanted to raise or make you aware of. Any questions?
Thanks, Paul. Councillor McPhail.
Sort of certainly brought up to the fore of the risk of diving in the Breaksea. Never thought about the great whites.
It's too cold, surely.
You get that wrong, you get eaten. So it obviously is a risk.
Yeah, so like with any diving operation, the natural elements surrounding us are, do pose risks, and this was very much highlighted in our risk assessments, when building up to the project itself. I guess the odd thing about it was that we weren't really expecting great whites in the Sound at that time of the year, and not necessarily, actually seeing them. And, so it was definitely a stop point for us. And when we talk about a sighting, it was, a sighting from an observer up on a vessel, that has spotted a shark in the vicinity. So it wasn't doing anything as such other than cruising past whatever it was doing. So, but there was a good stop point for us, and we could assess our controls around that.
Just another quick question. I see sleep hygiene.
It's not what you think, Councillor Farr. It's not where your brain went immediately.
So that's
Clean sleeping.
well, no.
Fresh pyjamas.
That's probably more like a holistic view on general sleep. And maybe hygiene is the right word.
It's a good, yeah, it's a good word.
More than anything.
Yeah, getting a good night's sleep.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
That would be nice.
Getting off your screen before you go to sleep, Councillor Farr. I've got Councillor McCallum and then Bruce. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, it's more of an observation more than a question, but I was made aware that Scotland, through the COVID response, the government did a huge amount of work with its people, guidance and that sort of stuff. It got to a point where they said our role as a government has now changed. It's now your personal responsibility. So we're not going to tell you what to do, but we're going to make sure you have the opportunity to have flu vaccines and COVID vaccines and those sorts of things that are there if you want them. And I wonder whether we're in the same camp. We're in stage 2 of response, and it now comes back to personal responsibility. I have no view, but I want to make sure that if you want to take the opportunities that are in front of you for your own risk, and that could actually go further down the track to shingle vaccine, because COVID and shingles are sort of related as well, that we actually sort of start that response. So we're not pressurising staff, or we're not putting a view on staff or anybody around the table that is because you're not this or that, we don't want to associate with you, but we're actually saying your responsibility now is that these things are here, and if you are, like anybody, if you are unwell, then we suggest that you don't turn up, or you form another way of Zooming in or Teams in or whatever. So I think there's a changeover here within our approach to what we're seeing as health to our staff and our overall well-being. I just wonder, I think we're in that stage now. You have responsibility as an individual now. It's not we're going to tell, because I think that discussion's run out.
And agree, I think as an organisation, we've taken a very mature view on that. And we've most certainly, have always taken the approach that, we'll give the best possible advice to our staff, but ultimately always leaving that final choice to them. And I must say our staff has responded, remarkably well to that, because they've always chosen the best choice, and they've really thought about it and, challenged us on some of our, if we wanted to pass some more, call it draconian controls, they were often challenged and said, hang on, we are mature enough to make those decisions ourselves, and most certainly the organisation has responded to that very well.
Fantastic. I've got Bruce.
Thank you, and thank you, Lyndall. Thank you, Paul, for the report. I found it, along with all the reports, going to say, Lyndall, really good this time around and very, very helpful, and I'm grateful for it. But just really a couple of clarifications, questions, Paul. I was just, and it probably represents me being a wee bit ignorant of operations here. The quarry one interested me. We don't own the quarries. I presume they're our source of material for our flood banks and other work. Why do we have a health and safety responsibility over those?
We do own quarries.
Oh, we do own them?
Yep, quarries are owned by us. They're just no longer in operation.
As in contrast to the landowner.
Sorry.
As in contrast to the landowner. We say staff have met with the landowner.
Yes, so there's bordering landowners.
Oh, okay.
And we're creeping in onto their...
Oh, okay, gotcha. Understand that. That's a clarification I needed. Thank you. Look, the other one then, please, is just trying to relate chart 2 and chart 3. Okay, which chart 2 is the incidences by severity. And chart 3 is the hazard identification. You know, if we identify something as a hazard and we manage it, the heck out of it, we probably aren't going to have an incident there. So what I was interested in, what is the relationship of the incidences that we have in chart 2 with actually our hazard register? So I'm trying to actually match the two. Are we you know, put it this way, are any of those incidences related to any of our high risks? Or are they're just other things which happen in the course of things? I mean, are any of those significantly related to vehicles or other likes? Or we have environment field, we have environment water. I'm not quite certain what they all mean. What I'm trying to get at here is it working for us?
Yes. Now, it's often the case that your incident is the lead up to the potential hazard identification. So often it can happen that we have the incident first, and then we identify and often highlights a new hazard, and then that gets updated in the register, such that we go back and assess that hazard based on the incident. Yes, we are seeing in some cases, most certainly our hazard identification process is most probably reducing the chances of us having a particular incident. Now, most of our incidents particularly over this reporting period, have been, relatively low level, but any incident always has that potential to be far worse. So, and just a simple example is that we had 2 stings, and even though in our risk register, stings is highlighted as a hazard, we've responded to that by elaborating a bit more on the stings itself, and that's one of our new sort of hazards identified, and we've broadened it not only to bee stings but to wasp stings or to any other insect stings as such. So there is a correlation between the two, but we're not seeing a huge amount of connection as such as that we're seeing incidents that are particularly related to our high risk hazards as such.
That's a good result, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. I mean, look, vehicles and driving is always going to be up there, and we did have a vehicle incident, which was fairly recent, and that's always going to happen if you know what I mean. That's, particularly on the vehicle side of things. I'm not sure that I've answered your question.
No, it has.
But I see the.
Yeah, I'm wanting to check that actually the hazard stuff is giving rise to what should be the benefit. We don't have accidents or issues in that area, and hopefully these numbers bear it out.
Yeah.
Would be what I'd be keen to see. Okay, that's helpful, Paul. Thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Just clarification. I'm not sure. How many quarries do we own, and how many do we take product out of? Because I was under the impression that we actually gave that away because we didn't have blasting certificate rights. So I'm just not too sure whether we're clear on what we have full control of and what we don't.
And I stand under correction, but I believe we own 3 quarries, of which 2 were inspected recently. But as I said, we haven't been taking material out of those quarries for a while. Reason being is, first of all, we don't have a quarry manager in our employee, in our staff as such. And I think a lot of the material has been of no use to us. So the quarries have pretty much been sitting dormant for a while. That's my understanding. But as I said, I could be speaking under correction around the numbers. It's either 2 or 3.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Well, if you need more detail, would you provide more detail?
I think, and Chair, if I point to the question, whether we own them or we get rock, we need to make sure that we're doing it safely and following the protocols, because we're talking about our large non-movable objects, and when they hit you, they hurt. So I just want to make sure that we are right, whether we own them or not, Because if we own them, our responsibility is greater. If we don't own them and we are a buying party, then our responsibility is less. That said, we need to make sure we've got rock when we need it for the projects we have, so.
Paul, that's Paul.
Yeah, perhaps what would be a good thing to do, councillor, is to, at the next regional services meeting, we could probably bring quarry specifically update what we own, what quarries we use, and some of the responsibilities we have, and we can clarify it that way, all through all that. We can provide an update.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, whichever channel is the most appropriate. I think that would be great. Councillor McPhail.
If I can add, we will be discussing one of the inquiries at the regional service this afternoon, so, which is sort of new too, so we could probably expand on that discussion just to clarify what we want to bring.
Yeah, I think
Details this afternoon.
a comprehensive report that covers off everything would probably be.
Could we put in that, Madam Chair, that I think there is, and you mentioned it, Paul, so the other Paul, when you take product out, there is product that is like primary use product, but there's also secondary product. And maybe we need to get an understanding of the percentage of what is usable for us and what is not as usable, but it could be used in a different light. Because if we're going to blow the stuff out of the rock and have it in different and sort it, we need to make sure that we're actually utilising the full range of product. Otherwise, we have piles of, and that ends up not being used or dumped or whatever. I think we need to get a balanced understanding of the scope, because this is quite a specific area, technical area in its own right. So,
Yep, thanks. Just before I ask for mover and a seconder, just wanted to congratulate you on the report myself, and I really like the very busy health and wellbeing section. That's good. Busy but important, and really pleased to see such good progress on the audit observations. There's only a couple of things that are still needing some attention, so I look forward to those being covered off. So thanks, Paul and team. There's a big team in there now, yay. A mover and a seconder, please. Oh, Chairman Horrell, have you got something else?
Happy to move as well, Madam
Thanks.
Chair, but just noting, obviously these reports you're hoping you're going to get behaviour change, and the graph on page 35, apart from July, it does show incidents trending in the right direction when you look at those three graphs, and also good to see that we're bringing in the nurses and doing some of those health checks, because our organisation will be no different to the general population who perhaps don't get the checks done as often as they should. So well done. That's a good health and safety initiative.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Chairman. Mover and seconder, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Item 3, Information Management Systems Technology and Data Update.
Jane, Carol and Paul Toomey to speak to that today.
Kia ora, everybody. Not sure how we'll follow from Paul's wonderful report. I'd like to take our report as read, and it also covers the last 2 quarters. I think the last one we reported back was in February. So I'll cover off some of the highlights and then we can take some questions. So the highlights are the Information Management Strategy Review. It is now in its 2nd stage and final review is underway, and there is a completion date of hopefully the end of September for that strategy, and so then we'll be reporting back through this committee once that is completed. What has been really useful through the strategy is using the Archives New Zealand tool, and so that's really identified some of the areas that we're going to focus on, so that's been a really helpful tool in making progress in this report. As you're aware, we've got an additional BA in our team. He started in December, and so he's got a really good skill set on automation, and so we're starting to get some progress on a lot of our manual processes are starting to be automated internally. So we're starting to see the benefits of that resource, that's for sure. So, Paul's team's really benefiting from some of his expertise, so that is a good bit of progress. The contacts project, of course, continues to be a focus for us. Training continues. The importance of having good up-to-date records continues to drive this project. We have, as you'll see by the graph that I have in there, that there's been a 10% increase of verified customers, and so that's showing good progress in that space. We have got a team of people that are well trained in this space and are now, it is a focus area. And you'll see that the numbers fluctuate through the months. That's as we get new customers on, as people not quite birth, deaths and marriages, but a little bit of that comes into it, and as our customers change, we update our customers all the time. The Office 365 project that is taking shape. Again, Bruce is leading that project within the team, within the internal team, and he is making good progress. You'll see, and we're leaving it until the change of council, is that we'll move potentially away from Teams, from Zoom to Teams for meetings, and we're just looking at options of how we can fit out the rooms, and so it makes it nice and easy to come into a room to join a meeting and all of those things. So there's a bit of investigation underway there. We plan also to give extensive training to the next council that comes in. If anybody needs some training now because you've been sent Teams meetings or anything, we're more than happy to conduct that training in the meantime. So that's the update there. Our online dashboard has proved to be popular. We've had 258 new visitors to that particular place on our website. These metrics have only been in place for a month, so that was within 1 month of July that was the hits. And our solicitor portal has always been really popular, of course, with our solicitors and getting the information they need, but yes, starting to see the other forms come to the top of the list, and we continue to develop new forms during the month, and there's like the first passage, don't say that fast, the online payments for applications. So now when you apply for a consent, it's nice and simple and easy, and it's a tick box and you put your deposit in, and the pest exemption forms, and we've started working on the general consents forms as well. So that will flow through each month. Hopefully I'll be able to report an update on that. Moving to the digital plan strategy. This is our technology capabilities and digitalising what we do, and we're looking towards a more digital future. And what does that mean, and how does that tie back into our organisational strategy and strategic direction? So yeah, so that work has just started, and that will align to the other strategies. One of the big focuses at the moment, that has been a focus obviously for the last 18 months, but is our cyber security. And we are, through the audit, we've been recognised that we are doing some things really, really well, and there are obviously areas for improvement. So I'll focus on the areas for improvement, and the table on page 45 is looking at, we've identified five key areas that we're going to concentrate on. We're engaging with Spark to help facilitate this piece of work, and we're meeting on a weekly basis to ensure that we remain on track and that we actually deliver this piece of work, because it's got real high priority, as we all know. The risks around our security, having a low security posture. So I won't go into the technical descriptions of each of those 5 areas, but more than happy to take any questions on those. And yeah, so in summary, the big ticket items are the information management strategy, the Office 365, and moving to the collaboration tools that are available there in the cyber security.
Probably just focusing back on that information management toolkit that we use to actually find a baseline measurement for our information management at the moment. You'll see from the actual diagram that we actually have percentages around where we're sitting, what we're actually managing, where we're beginning, and where we're actually needing to work. That information will help inform the IM strategy. That will also help inform what things we need to work on in the next 3 years to actually improve that status. We're proposing that we run this maturity toolkit every year so that we can actually see the improvements that we are making. I think probably a real priority from the information management strategy and from this toolkit is that we need to get our governance group together, and we need to make sure that we've got strong governance over this. So that will be a priority once we get that strategy out and ready and rolling.
Thanks. Questions? I'm looking a bit stunned. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Chair. I know you talked about synthetic nitrogen reporting yesterday, but one of the things that the feedback I've had is they didn't know whether the form was asking for kilograms per hectare, tonnes per hectare, or nitrogen, and the balance form that you get back is actually complicated, and it is not clear, and people weren't clear about what you were asking. So in that, if I use that as an example, when we upload stuff to you, or we try and send emails to you, it often rejects it. So I'm picking up on your point on page 45, the firewall system that ES has starts to flare up to me is, what does that firewall look like as far as information uploading files, data to you? And you're talking about a double firewall system. How do we get the information to you that you require? And do we have to go through, and if that information was infected with something, are we able to detect it?
So the information that comes through the online portal comes direct to us. So I'd like to unpack perhaps offline about what those rejections are. Any emails that come through our email gateway, so that is a different system from the firewall, and we do have rules and filtering to ensure that we're not getting hacked or spammed or the like. But
from an
business
organisational point of view, I'm saying because the risk is that someone with some very clever computer skills breaks into our system, either gets data they shouldn't have, or they interrupt their system and lock it up. So I'm really suggesting or asking, how good is our firewall or firewalls? Are they adequate when we've got two-way flow of information? It's easier when you've only got information out, but when you've got information coming into you and it's going into your internal systems for processing in some formula or another, are we secure enough, or what do we need to do to make sure that that is actually not a risk to the business, that firewall is broken by default, but because somebody had an issue on their computer, it's picked it up, and also all the contacts have gone out, that sort of stuff.
So our biggest risk, of course, is our users and clicking on a phishing email. There may have been one last week that was released. So the single firewall at the moment, without getting technical, is from a failure point of view. So if our single point of failure fails, then we don't have we have one that's in the cupboard but not active. So we're looking at having an active firewall so that if one falls over, then the other one is there. The big piece of work that we're about to embark on is we have looking at an engagement with Crowdstrike, and they do 24/7, 365 days of the year monitoring of our system. So that's looking at what our security posture is, ensuring that we have all the pinholes closed, ensuring that we are being monitored. So if anything changes or some activity looks like there might be somebody in our system, they can actually remediate immediately. So that's that piece of work. So that's a budgeted piece of work that and that's is about to kick off as soon as we can. Yeah, and I've got a paper just to go to Amy today. Yeah. So that will give us that external 24/7 monitoring that will give us that peace of mind.
Thanks, Jane. Chairman Horrell and then Councillor Cook.
I was reading the report, I thought, solicitor portal inquiry, I thought, was this just for lawyers? Probably not, so.
Yes, it is.
It is?
Yes, it is.
Yes, okay.
Yes. So that's the solicitors coming into our site to get, for the sale and purchase agreements, what our rates balances are, what the rates balances are. And that is our most part of our website, yeah.
The other question was, well, it's not a question, I guess we can get a bit updates when we move to Teams. I find, and we're having smaller meetings now anyway, but when you get a cast of 100 odd, I don't find it as good as Zoom, but if we're going to save $13,000, I'm sure we can adapt.
And that will be part of that conversation, Councillor. It'll be about, you know, what is the benefit of having Zoom where you can have more faces on the screen as opposed to currently Teams. I suspect that they'll move to more faces on the screen.
Thanks. It's an enduring issue. Faces on the screen.
I don't know what it was 2 years ago.
Well, my experience is that a lot of the meetings that we go into, people turn their cameras off, and I think that, you know,
Yeah.
I have a personal opinion that we should have policy around cameras on.
They might.
If you're there, camera on.
Yeah.
If you're not there.
That might need to be adjusted in our code of conduct for the new council too, because
I think so.
as long as you've got a tidy top on.
I won't go there.
Wear your slippers. A question from me, Jane, quickly. Actually, Councillor Cock first and then mine. Sorry, Councillor.
Thanks, Chairman. Just the customer contact management project, noting that we have multiple databases and to be working on it. When will we achieve perfection? Because we seem to get this feedback each time we try and do a group announcement out there. No one told me, I didn't get an email. So when do we get perfection?
Personally, I think it's a continuous improvement project that, you know, as people move about and things change, you give your cell phone number and you forget to tell your local council that you've changed your cell phone number, and you change your email address, and so there's a human aspect to it as well, but that whole QAing of our current data and making sure that that's a continuous improvement, and we have an annual review on contacts is what part of the plan is.
So I suppose I'm asking, are we happy that our systems are up to speed?
I think there's room for improvement, and particularly in this online space, it gives our customers the ability to actually tell us what their new details are a lot easier, and that's integrated with our system. So I think we're on, as Amy's word is, the journey of, I don't think that we'll ever achieve perfection, is my honest answer. Even the IRD can't get it right, especially.
Madam Chair, and or just to add to Jane's point, I think with people constantly changing things, to just elaborate on that, it is never going to be 100%. I guess the point is, what do we need to do to get it as good as we can, and what's the time frame around that? And I think there's two things around that. Doing it as we're currently doing it, which is asking people when they're on a customer contact or call to check in and update the details, will get us so far, but it's quite slow. It probably needs some dedicated resource to make some proper inroads into that. and it's a conversation that we need to have as we map out our transformational and our digital program of work as to where we want to prioritise the investment and the spend. And that acknowledging that, you know, it being customer data, it probably needs to be a priority area, but it's not a conversation that we have had internally yet.
Thank you.
Just a quick question from me. The next steps for the IM strategy are to finalise and communicate the strategy. Frightened to ask, but have you got a time frame for that?
So I hope to have that finished by the end of September. So that is my goal.
Yep.
And that's where I've put the nail in the sand effectively, and that's what I'm working towards. I can't see that I won't get there. So that's exactly where I want it to be.
Great. Thanks. Everybody, thank you. Councillor McCallum's moving. Councillor Cook is seconding. Any further questions? All of those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, team. And then we move to item 4, which is the procurement and contract management. Fun times.
And could I invite Chris again to talk to this paper? Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Madam Chair. You'll see from the procurement report that there were several work streams within the procurement area that have fallen behind. And that is purely as a result of lack of resource dedicated to it. So the executive approved the recruitment of a specialist procurement officer, and recruitment of that began a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. But it did not. We conducted a single interview from a candidate, the one candidate who may have potentially been suitable, but it turned out that person wasn't suitable. So the search continues for a specialist procurement officer, and that is a work in progress. We need that role, someone in that role who can pick up these work streams and take them forward. Second point in the report is the development of a procurement strategy. We have a policy and we have a manual. I'll come to those in a minute, but we're also developing a procurement strategy, which is essentially the bridge, if you like, between the policy and the manual. I anticipate to have that first draft completed by the end of this month, the end of August, for review by the executive, and we'll see how that goes. That is a current work in progress. And finally, in this report, the procurement policy and the manual are both being revised and updated as a current work stream, essentially to bring in the social procurement aspect. The government-funded projects governance group recommended that the social good perspective be brought into the procurement process, and so the policy and the manuals are both being updated to reflect that. The social good really is about, instead of purely considering financial aspect of procurement and the fit for purpose of goods or services, it also bringing consideration of environmental, social or cultural aspects, and see if the additional value can be gained through the procurement process from those perspectives. So that is also a work in progress. There was a single procurement process underway through GETS, as noted, the Stead Street pump station, and that was the only most significant activity through the GETS in the review process. That's really all the report covers. I'm happy to pick up questions around that.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, on page 48, there's a list of timelines there. It looks like it's all last year. Is that date correct, or is there...
That's a fair question. That reflects the lack of resource on the ground. Those dates are the intended date of delivery of those work streams, and they haven't happened. So there's significant shortfall in that, and the intent is that the procurement resource, if and when we find someone, we'll pick up those to take those forward. So yes, your point is noted, they are late. They are from last year.
So the follow-up question is, bearing in mind this is quite an important part of what we do, how are we going to bridge the gap between where we are to actually where we want to be? Because I would have thought, picking up the essence of what you've just said in your opening comments, we want to do that anyway.
Chris?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I mean, yes, there is a significant shortfall. At the moment, the procurement function is managed by someone who's really wearing multiple hats and covering multiple roles. And that's why we needed to get this person on the ground. It was disappointing that the one candidate who was interviewed wasn't suitable, but resourcing some of these work streams is the issue facing ES at the moment, as it is, for example, with the risk program that I'll be talking to later on.
Look, I think one of the challenges that we have, particularly in this space, when we think about the contracting market generally, and we've had this conversation and in other meetings, is that it's really, really heated. So everybody and their dog who's involved in procurement and contract management are otherwise occupied. So that doesn't mean there isn't someone out there for us, but we weren't able to get them first time round, and we need to have another look. We need to have a look at our role. We need to make sure that that's designed and communicated in a way that it's going to work for us. We probably need to do some thinking, you know, to your point, Councillor, about actually, you know, what risk are we carrying by not having these programs of work in place? Do they need prioritised, and is there some other way that we can be delivering them? I think as we've said in other conversations where we've been talking about resourcing, it's not just having a permanent person in situ to be able to do the work. You know, what access do we have to people and some sort of contracting capacity who also might be a bit like hen's teeth, and you know, and also do we have the people in situ within the organisation to actually manage the contracted work? So this is a challenge. It's a significant challenge for us, and it's a very real one. So that's not an answer, but it's something that, you know, have a look and see how we might be able to resolve those issues.
Reply, Madam Chair. I'm in private business as well as being here to help run this organisation, but if we find there's roadblocks, we find ways around it. And maybe our approach is we have to find another way around it. If we prioritise this as being essential for the business, we're going to have to find a way of doing it, with or without a staff member, because we've actually put this as a high priority, and it's one of the things we need to do. So can I suggest that we have a look at how do we do this with the constraints that we have in front of us?
Acknowledged.
I might comment on that in a minute. But firstly, we've got Bruce and then Chairman Horrell. Thank you.
Thanks, Lyndall, and indeed, Lloyd, you really asked my question, which is what risks are we running at the moment? I'd love to look more of this from the positive side, Amy, which is actually, it's not as if we are necessarily devoid. I mean, we have financial delegations in place, correct? So, you know, we do have delegations and processes in place. There's an aspect to which they clearly need to be reviewed. And perhaps we do have one or two instances where perhaps more robust procurement may have helped us prior to some of the situations we're dealing with at the moment. So I think, Lloyd, it's difficult to potentially know what where we are with risks, other than I agree with you. We must be running risks. And we've got one or two high profile incidences, which may not have been done. One question, so my question, sorry, there's a statement, but you wanted a question as well. My interest is actually in the contract register, which is technically different to procurement. It's actually contract management. And that's actually quite important from a control perspective, to make certain we know our contracts, we've got our contractors under management. So I understand the procurement risk, and take the point, Lloyd, what's plan B? It's a good question. But with the contract register, can you just Amy or Chris flesh that one out a bit more, because we've got a myriad of contracts.
Yep.
How do we know they're being fulfilled? How do we have control over those? How do we review them in the right time? All those sorts of things that a contract register would help us have some assurance of.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we do have a contract register. It's predominantly used in the catchment and operations space. I could pretty much guarantee that it wasn't comprehensive in terms of capturing all our contractors, and I think, you know, as part of the work that we've alluded to here, it needs elaboration and review and a process put around it for all of our contracts, and that's not in place yet. So again, to, you know, acknowledge the risk that's implicit in the question.
So I guess the follow-up point to that, Lyndall, is you're saying, and I'm agreeing with you, by the way, Lloyd, this is priority.
Yep.
So I guess to some extent we're trying to say we need to pressure ourselves to find the solution on this baby. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it, Lyndall.
Thanks. Chairman Hall?
Yes, Madam Chair, it's obviously a specialised role, finding difficulty to finding the right person. I'll just throw it out there. Is the potential for a shared service with some of the TAs, similar type contracts? At the moment, you've got an add-on to one person, but if you've got somebody with those specialised skills, all the councils are doing the same sort of things. There may be potential to have a specialised person who was working with 1, 2 or 3 entities. Just throw that one out there.
Yep, no, thank you.
I'm not going to comment actually. Just reinforcing the need, and finding a creative way, but I'm sure that staff have been trying to do that and will set their minds to it further.
I'm happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Moved, Councillor, seconded Mr. Robertson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Sorry, Alan, I'm just checking. You're all right in there. Right, item 5 is the risk management program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This risk management report brings a different perspective to looking at risk, but we went back to the managers and asked for, as we always do, for any update to the risk register, any change to risk assessment or mitigation strategies, and there was no changes that came through as a result of that request for information. So rather than reporting or re-reporting what we reported last time with the whole list of risks, we've brought a different perspective on risk into the report. So there are 3 parts to this, or 2 parts to this report. First, as with the procurement, we're trying to recruit a risk officer / internal audit. We've spoken in previous APAC meetings about the need for that role from a risk management perspective. We conducted interviews with 2 or 3 suitable candidates, and one in particular stood out. Amy, can you update us on
Yes.
that particular person?
Absolutely. I'm delighted to say that we've been able to recruit said individual, and they will be joining us on the 22nd of August, which is wonderfully timeful because we have a risk workshop with full council on the 24th, and I will bring our new risk advisor along and introduce her, and she will be participating in that workshop as well. So yes, very successful, and delighted to have someone on board to do that role.
That role will be important from 2 perspectives. One, to further or better inculcate risk awareness within the teams, and the second part of that is the internal audit program. This person brings skills in that area as well. So I would welcome the development of an internal audit program for review by the executive, and then the conduct of that internal audit will be one important component of risk management within the organisation. So I'm very pleased that role has been found and is coming on as soon as she is. The second part of the report, because there was no significant change to the risks that have previously been reported. The risk register has been reviewed and updated to where the risks are duplicated, bring them into a single risk called corporate, and an example of that is the ability to recruit and retain staff. It was common across various teams, and I would argue that it needs, in part, a corporate response to how we might manage that difficulty. So risk register is slightly reduced in terms of the number of risks. But more importantly, this report brings in this risk perspective on the source of the risk. We've identified the various risks and what they are and mitigation strategies, but a different lens, if you like, across the risk register is the risk source. Where is this risk coming from? And a preliminary view of this brings in 8 risk sources. And the table on page 53 of your package shows the risk source and where the risks lie in terms of the 78 risks that are currently in the risk register. So it shows of the 18 risks that are regarded as very high, that's pre-mitigation. There are 4 sources of that risk: climate, nature, community, and iwi. And that community really is about failure to engage adequately across some of the work streams, and then finding resistance from the community or from iwi. Financial environment, that's funding sources, funding resource, and finally internal resource. So that just gives a view on where the various risks are coming from and can inform the responses to some of those risk categories, rather than just considering what the risk is itself. So the intent of this report is to provide that different lens, a different perspective, rather than just relisting all the risks in the risk register, which you've already seen, and to which there's no real change. The very high risks remain largely unchanged from the last report, so we haven't listed those again. There are slightly fewer because of the concatenation of some of the risks into one. So it is hoped that this lens will, as I say, provide, as with the vehicle usage metrics, we hope that this will provide some insight into how we might approach the risk management of some of these risks, rather than from a purely individual risk perspective. I'm looking forward to the resource coming on board in a couple of weeks. When she does, I will sit down with her and work through what has been done to date, what remains to be done, and provide suggestions on a way forward to better bring risk management consideration into the planning of the ES work program. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Really nice to see that different lens in that reduction of repetition in some of the risk report. It's great. Councillor McCallum.
Chris, this looks like a risk report for the organisation. I've probably got 3 things sitting around from a council perspective that I won't name them, but are sitting there that are in the processes of developing and could actually be quite a big risk to the organisation going forward, because I've already heard community feedback that is blaming us, and I actually think it's been incorrectly aimed. So my question really is, how do I, as a councillor, feed into your risk matrix? Because in page 53, you've only got 1 low risk under council as a heading. And I wonder whether, from a council perspective, from our view of the world, there are things moving or coming or developing that we can see that I would say is a higher than 1 and higher than a low. And I'm not sure how, because you reported to us that you've had an internal view and you've reassessed your list. But how do I actually, as a councillor, put some of those things on there or make sure they are on there?
Your point is noted, councillor. We haven't engaged with councillors at all in the further updating of this risk register, and I think that is something that can easily be brought into the process to ensure that before this risk report is finalised, councillors have the opportunity to feed into that and reflect the changing circumstances that perhaps are better seen or understood by the governance group rather than people on the ground.
Yeah, I think we need to make that a regular systemic process so that. Bruce, did you
Yes, I did touch
Thank
him.
you. I figured you would.
Chris, again, thank you. As you say, useful to get actually some different lenses on it. And I just wondered whether you could, or someone could expand for me that, and I must admit, when I read it, of course, it's pre-mitigation risk, so it does suggest we may well have mitigated it, but community iwi being a risk source. We're a local authority, we should be experts in managing our community in iwi. Are you able to give me an indication why this is a risk, and actually, in a post-mitigation sense, is it actually our biggest risk? Because at the moment, looking at that at a pre-mitigation level, it's half our risk.
Yes, indeed. I think it reflects, well, I don't have the risk register right in front of me, our councillor, but I know that came through from the teams reflecting on the risk to the work stream, on failure to liaise and engage with community and iwi groups, and then finding resistance to that work stream if that was not done. From memory, the mitigation strategy really said we need to fully and carefully engage with the community and with iwi to ensure that doesn't occur. And my understanding is that post-mitigation, that risk isn't particularly high, but it was regarded as very high pre-mitigation in terms of just acknowledging the need to undertake that liaison and engagement.
No, that's helpful, Chris, because I mean, probably the key in what you've said is that we've interpreted in post-mitigation as being low, which means we've put the right focus on it.
Yes.
My concern will be as we go through these processes, if we still see that in a post-mitigation environment as significant, I would be worried, because that's Section 10 of the Act, for and by the people, This shouldn't be, we need to make certain this one's now. Thank you for that, Chris, that's really, really helpful. Thank you, Lyndall, that was my big question, so I'll leave it at that, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor McPhail.
Just to clarify that, is it when you're saying post mitigation, is it trying to view looking ahead what it would look like, or is it have we fixed the problem?
Yeah,
it sounds like we fixed the problem and we're in post mitigation.
Yes. So that's what I was. Yeah, that's if I could answer that, Lyndall. That's what I was getting at was in short, we look at the idea of risk. We talk about raw risk. If we don't do anything about it, how big an issue is it? And it will be, how big a matter is it? We then want to think about the controls that we have in place, the mitigations we have in place, so that it doesn't affect our business. So that's why I talk about post mitigation. We're saying community iwi, and it's interesting to hear what you said. And it's great to hear staff views, by the way, Chris. That's tremendous. That staff sense our relationship with the community is really important. We don't have it right, it'll rear its head up, and we're going to not achieve what we want to achieve. What I'm hearing from Chris is that actually we put focus on it, we have put in place controls. It's less of an influence in us not achieving what we want to achieve.
Correct.
Now, that's staff's view, by the way. I think the 24th may well be a question. Is that your view? Because I think that's actually what Lloyd's saying as well, is actually I've got some views too, and that's in development. So that'll be very interesting to see how that comes out.
Probably from the council, there's
Yeah.
point of view. That's not surprising.
Yeah.
It's still understating.
Yeah.
What may the risk there.
Yes.
As we're trying to engage with the community and iwi, and we're starting to see some reputational damage because we haven't got capacity in certain areas that start to come to the fore. So that's only going to elevate the risk to the organisations and that. And so that's coming from my ground.
Yeah, I get you, mate. And look, it's something I'm being a bit rude. I want to make one other comment, which is the benefit of what actually Lyndall and Amy have been leading, which is that we split this meeting up into risk and into finance, and Chris getting on top of the risk stuff. Because we haven't had that chance really for this sort of structured conversation. So I think that's the benefit of where we're going, Jeremy, because, councillors' views are pretty critical.
Chairman Horrell and then me.
Yes, I guess when you have community/iwi, it's a very big sector. These are actually people that ultimately employ us. And I think, COVID has been one of the risks. I think on the iwi thing, we've now got people on committees. I think that has improved, but it is a reminder to us that communicating our message with the community is crucial, and currently it is a risk. We're behind the 8 ball, not being able to have held as many face-to-face meetings as we'd like, but yeah, I still think that is a significant risk at the moment, and it's an area we do need to focus on going forward.
Thanks, I think we all agree on that one. Just my question, Chris, really is how are we going to be able to see the trends in this going forward? Because given this is the first time we've seen it presented to us quite like this, keeping abreast of the trends and the fluctuations will be quite important when we're dealing with different mitigations for different things. So how do you anticipate we might see that coming through?
I think when we get the resource on board, and to be instead of quarterly going out to managers saying what's changed, what's different, keeping top of mind and keeping updating of the risk register and the risk mitigation, and having liaisons with the teams, and then in this reporting, bringing through what's changed. I mean, reporting the same old, if there's no change, isn't useful to anybody. But reporting the changes from the last report should be the focus of the reporting. So I think there are 2 points noted. One is what are the changes, but 2, the report needs to bring in some of the post-mitigation, which we've just talked about, perspectives as well, to saying, well, if you said 6 community risks, iwi risks, 6 are very high, and from a practical business perspective, how much of a risk is it? And when we find that it's relatively low because we are engaging with iwi, then that perspective is brought in as well. And then, as I said, the changes that have occurred since the last time, as you say, the trends, Madam Chair, should be the focus of the report as well. And that's what, if with Amy's permission, if I can sit down with the new person when they come on board, that is some of the perspectives on the report and I'd like to be bringing in. What I'd also like to see just on this is, and I've mentioned it before, is bringing in risk management software so the risk register is online on a permanent basis, easily accessible by managers for regular updating, rather than quarterly going around and saying, well, what's changed, what's different. So there are various steps we can take to improve this reporting and improve on the view of changing risks over time.
Thanks, Chris. Amy?
And just to build on there and build on Chris' point, risk isn't something that sits in a software system or on a spreadsheet. It's a dynamic thing that we're experiencing and managing. And so the beauty of having someone internally who can be proactively having conversations with managers and staff to find out what's happening, to test to make sure that the mitigations that we have in place to reduce the risks that we perceive to exist, are actually working and controlling the risk. And as and when there are, loath to use the word incidents, but very similar to our health and safety methodology, but thinking about broader risk, where there are incidents, we are investigating, we are making sure that we've got all our risks captured, controlled, managed, documented, and that we're aware of them as well. There's enormous power in actually having someone to support that activity, as well as documenting and reporting it.
Thanks, everybody. Mover and seconder, if we have finished discussions. Thanks, Councillor Cook. Second, Chairman Horrell. Any further questions? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, and congratulations. That's the first of its kind, I think, really, that lens across the risks. So thanks very much for all the work, because it's been a while. It's been a lot of work. Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right, that takes us to the annual activity plan, which is item 6, and then we will break for a cuppa after we've moved into public excluded. Thank you.
Fantastic. Tania, can I ask you to turn your screen on and talk to this report? Are you there?
Kind of nipped out for a cuppa, is
No, oh, you know, here we are.
Here she comes.
Kia ora, Tania, thank you.
Kia ora. So I'd be probably more comfortable without my video. You can see I have a camera problem.
Yes, you do.
I might turn that off because it'll possibly make you feel unwell. So it makes me feel unwell looking at it.
Good as gold. Carry on.
Right, Chair. So we're looking at a report that just has a couple of adjustments in it. We're highlighting items in blue down the bottom right. We have moved those reports from 14th of September to the 17th of November, moving into where they probably should have sat, which is in the risk area. So the fund manager review, we put the date on it originally as October. We're proposing now 17th of November. An insurance report, so our insurance renews in October, and we will have a report back from, we will have a report to bring to the next OPEC meeting after that on our total insurance situation. We have in the past actually asked the insurance advisor, Aon, to present to OPEC, and that sort of hasn't happened the last 2 years, but it was always a good opportunity for you to directly ask the brokers questions that might be on your mind about the market and total risks out there and what's changing. We can be assured it is changing. And by that time, hopefully our new risk person will have had a chance to overview our potential internal audit program, or at least make a start on that. And yeah, so that, Chair, is our recommendations for the activity plan.
Thanks. And the triennial agreement on the second page?
Actually, it's highlighted in blue. I think it needs to sit, so it probably should have moved to the 2023 rather than be highlighted in blue and continuing to sit where it is. So that's an amendment we need to make to that report.
When will that be?
I might look at my colleague Rachel and ask for a response.
The only reason I raise that, Rachel, is that through Madam Chair is I would assume that the sooner it's done in the term, the better. And I just wonder whether that's a little bit late.
For you, Chair, that's the due date is March 2023, so we are already looking at what needs to be on the revision of that.
And that's still quite soon in the term by the time we get through the summer break and all the other things, unless you have a particular concern that it's soon.
No, I just think it needs to be early, and whether February's too early or not, but I think it needs to be early in that term. So, I suppose my real question is, we're at the meeting on the 14th September, are we happy that everything's been tidied up, that we need to tidy up, and as Bruce said, is, so we've finished off their work streams and we've left the foundation for the new term to pick up and carry on. These work streams don't disappear, but we've got some windows that we need to have some closure on, and some windows that need to start. I'm just wondering what staff's view on that was. Are they happy that we're in the right where we said we'd be, and we're going to have the work completed?
I think that's a conversation that we would come back and have as of that date. But we will work to that, of course.
Can I just, if I'm next?
Yes, you are next.
Thank you. Sorry. Look with that, Amy, just can you just remind me, when do we plan to get our audit opinion?
Oh,
Would somebody
Tanya,
be able to
is
help me on that, or perhaps Tanya
that's
knows?
that's in September, I think. Tanya, can you clarify that?
Yes, we are actually planning to present.
Oh, sorry, can you speak up, Tanya? We're having difficulty hearing you.
Okay, there we go. Hopefully that's better.
It is now, yeah. Thanks.
We are scheduled to present.
Oh, it's coming and going, Tanya.
So could I make a suggestion that Tanya doesn't try and join through on her computer and calls in on her phone, because since we don't need to see her, and then we might be able to hear her.
Okay, did you get that, Tanya? Can you give us a thumbs up if you
I did hear that.
Are you able to ring in on your
I
phone
just simply need to know the date. Is it September or is it afterwards?
or enter it in the chat? Is it the September or afterwards for the audit opinion?
For the election.
Before the election.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, it's a big legacy issue for this committee to deal with, so that's good. So I presume it's September, or else we'll have to think about something that's extraordinary. Look, just on your thing, a couple of things that struck me. Our insurance renewal date is what, 1 November? Correct? Yeah, thank you, Chris. So it actually would make sense, if we're thinking legacy, for us to meet with the advisors prior to the breakup of the election. So I wonder whether the meeting with Aon advisors, and I totally agree with Tanya, that's not a bad thing, can that be brought forward to September? I'm sure they could zoom in. Because, pardon? Okay, look, I'm thinking here pre-election.
It's pre-election for that reason.
Oh, okay, rightio.
It's not OPEC, it's an October council.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And,
Look, and Wilma, I'm not precious about OPAC or council. All I'm trying to reflect here is that you would normally meet your advisor to have a discussion about what you plan to purchase. There's no point us meeting it's a different story. There's no point a new council, if we're thinking about a legacy, meeting an advisor in November, because the council hasn't got their feet under the table. We're better to do that work for the new council in September or October and agree what we plan to purchase with our broker at that stage. So if I could just make a suggestion that comes forward. Looking at the other suggestion I had is, by the way, does OPAC have the responsibility for the triennial agreement? Why is it even on our list?
I thought that we put those items, I'm sorry, through you, they put those items in there because there's a risk in terms of making sure that we, that we are delivering on our statutory obligations. Yep.
Thank you.
So they're not necessarily for the work of this group.
Right, okay, gotcha.
But to have oversight as to the delivery of that work program.
I'm with you.
Chief Executive.
Thank you. So just to respond to Councillor's comment, yes, so that means that we can come with the triennial agreement and it's ready earlier in the calendar.
Councillor McCallum.
Just to follow on from Bruce's comments, we're suggesting around insurance. We're suggesting what insurance we purchase. So I think that what I'm seeing in the media is the availability of insurance may be different than what it has been in the past. And maybe we need to think about looking what we know, recommending to the new council, because I think that's how the process would work, where we think that there is emergency or some actual stuff that we need to do and there's some nice stuff to do, and maybe we should sort of divide that up. This world is changing very fast and some stuff is going forward is going to be uninsurable, and we need to start to understand that. And we've got a major capital investment coming up, and I want to know whether that is or how is it treated within our insurance policies. So we need to understand both sides of that.
And I think it only backs my wisdom saying we should see them earlier rather than later, on the basis that, pretty soon after the elections, the renewal date will have occurred. So they must need guidance from us.
And they already know where they are sitting. They already know where they are sitting.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
we need to join those dots.
Yeah.
So staff comfortable with that? We'll bring that forward as we can within reason. Lovely.
With that in mind, I'll move that.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Seconded, Mr. Robertson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That brings us to, there's no extraordinary or urgent business, so it brings us to the public excluded session. Once again, I'm suggesting that we move into public, grab a quick cuppa, public excluded, grab a quick cuppa and come straight back. Because we have meetings to follow, so we don't want to overrun ourselves. The reasons, please.
Reasons are to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations, to protect the privacy of natural persons, including that of deceased natural persons, and to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or advantage.
Thanks, Mel. Anybody move that? Thank you, Councillor Cook. And seconded, Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Nicole,